Thanks to the Pirates and Dodgers, the New York Mets remain in control of their fate in the wild card race, but that help is only going to take them so far as the Mets starting pitching crisis has reached a breaking point.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Now, the New York Mets got off to a brutal start yet again on Wednesday night. Jonah Tong did not have it, gives up 5 runs, does not record now in the third inning. And if you all were like me, you were left to watch the other games in this wildcard race, just hoping that the Mets could stay in front for another day and that magic number can drop, even though the Mets did nothing to earn it. And that's where we're at in this season. We've been talking about it for weeks. What would give you confidence in the New York Mets? Well, if they were able to win their way into the playoffs, you'd feel good. But if they back their way in, what makes you feel confident this Mets team can go on a run? I'll tell you right now, just to win the wild card series, there's 2 things that give me hope. Maybe 3. The first one, Nolan McLean. I think Nolan McLean can win a playoff game. The second one, the Dodgers bullpen has been brutal. And maybe that continues in the playoffs. The sort of third thing there is this Mets lineup can't score a bunch of runs. So if they can win a slugfest in one game and McLean can lead into victory in the other, maybe they can get past the wild card rounds in a 3-game series. But how are they going to survive a 5-game series, a 7-game series? How can this team possibly go on a run to win the World Series when right now, what do they have in their rotation? It's McLean, it's Sproat, who's about to make his 4th big league start? Maybe it's his 5th. I had to look. And that's what you're going to rely on because you just are game after game after game getting terrible starting pitching. And I don't want to make this show just a pile-on for Jonah Tong, who clearly has more that he has to develop in his game to be ready to get big outs in a pennant race. But he's 22 years old. He was just named the minor league pitcher of the year. That should have been it for Jonah Tong. Jonah Tong should have been allowed to make a handful of starts in Syracuse to finish off his year and gone into the offseason with all the confidence in the world that he's just finished off a year where he was the best pitcher in minor league baseball. But he has been thrust into this playoff race. He's giving you a couple good starts, but he's also giving you some really bad ones. In this game, that's what happened. And so then you are left to watch the other games, which when it came to Paul Skeens versus Hunter Green, that was a lot of fun to watch. Skeens kept the Reds off the board through the first 6 innings. Hunter Green gave up 2 runs, and you had the Pirates clinging to that 2-0 lead. 8th inning, Nolan Marte hits an inside the park home run. 9th inning, Tyler Stevenson hits a traditional home run. Game goes to extras. I thought for sure the Pirates are going to blow that game. But with 2 outs and a run already across in the 10th, the Pirates had scored in the top half. The Reds scored 1 in the bottom half. The Pirates go to Yohan Ramirez, the same guy that we watched pitch for the Mets last year and not very well. He had a 6.20 ERA with 4 different teams last year, has a 5.34 ERA at the Pirates this season. And Yohan Ramirez in a 10-pitch battle against Miguel Andujar, who fouled off 6 pitches with 2 strikes, finally strikes out. 11th inning, Pirates score another one. Here comes Ramirez to try to nail down the victory. Gets a big strikeout, but then he issues a walk. Gets a big fly out, so he's not away, but then issues another walk. So you got bases loaded, and who comes up? Nolan Marte, who got the Reds on the board in the 8th inning, and he had a leadoff single in the 10th that set them up to score that run. So now it's Marte. and he gets into a 3-1 count, and he gets a fastball to hit. And luckily for the New York Mets, he just hits a ground ball right to the third baseman, and that ends the game. So you were able to watch the Pirates win before the Mets officially lost. And then you look at the late game. Diamondbacks, Dodgers. Blake Snell holds the Diamondbacks to just 1 run through 6 innings. Dodgers take an early 3-1 lead. They tack off another run in the 8th inning, so they're winning 4-1. Alex Vesia comes on. He has been arguably their best reliever lately. He ends up blowing it, gives up 3. Game's tied, gets sent to extras. Dodgers don't score in the 10th inning. Diamondbacks get the sack, bunt down. They have a runner 90 feet away. They're about to get into playoff position. And the Dodgers intentionally walk the bases loaded to get that force out at the plate if they can possibly get a ground ball. Instead, it's a pop-up in the infield and a fly out, and they are able to get through that 10th inning. They score a run in the 11th. The Diamondbacks are held scoreless in the bottom half. Justin Robleski with his 4.45 ERA, a guy that was a starting pitcher coming up, not really one that you'd expect to pitch and leverage. He gets the final 3 outs in 2 11-inning games where the 2 road teams end up winning are what keeps the Mets in front in this wild card race. But it's nothing that they did to deserve to still be in front. Once again, they lay an egg after a big game. They had a chance to ride some momentum. And it's not the lineup's fault. I know you're going to look at the couple of runs, but they were going up against a good pitcher in Matthew Boyd. And it's tough to battle back 2 nights in a row when your starting pitching just is not good enough. And then your bullpen has to cover all of these innings just to get you through the game. So now you look at the New York Mets. Yes, their magic number is 4. There's 4 games left. If they win tonight and the Diamondbacks and the or this afternoon and the Diamondbacks and the Reds both lose, great. Your magic number drops to 2. Actually, it is a night game tonight. So great. Your magic number could drop to 2 going into that series against the Marlins. But then you still got to beat the Marlins. And who pitches on Sunday? Who pitches on Saturday? We're going to talk about those things here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season's here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to go, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And again, if that $5 bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. We're within 500. I really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. And also, if you want to watch an instant reaction show right after the game's end, make sure you check out our Locked On Mets postcast hosted by Chris Schubert. Chris goes live right after the final out. So if you want that gut reaction after a big Mets win or a devastating loss, make sure you check out that show and subscribe again to our YouTube channel. Now, Jonah Tong took a beating in this game. Gave up a leadoff double and a walk, so he was behind the 8 ball from jump. Strikes out Ian Happ, gives up a base hit up the middle, and he gets saved by Tyrone Taylor, who returned off the injured list, and his defense is welcomed out in center field. He guns down a runner at the plate, and then Tong is able to get a ground out to get out of the first inning. Second inning, 1, 2, 3 frames. So you had hopes that Jonah Tong could settle in and give them at the little bit of length and keep them in the game. But the third inning happened and he did not record now. Gives up a leadoff single, issues a walk, gives up another single to loads the bases. Ian Happ doubles over the first base bag to score 2. Another single scores another run, another double scores another run at that point after giving up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hits and a walk. Jonah Tong finally mercilessly pulled from the game, and Richard Lovelady comes on, gets the Mets through that inning, gives up a sac fly. So at that point, they're trailing 5-0. And it's hard to make it out of that 2 nights in a row. You had Lovelady who was able to, get through the next inning by giving up just a solo homer. So you were trailing 6-0. Francisco Alvarez hits a 2-run homer. You're thinking, all right, it's a 4-run deficit. You can get back in this game. But you already burned all of your leverage arms the day before, and you don't want to pitch those guys in a game that you're still trailing by 4. So you keep Lovelady in against Ballesteros, the lefty, to lead off the, what would that have been at that point, the 5th inning. He walks him, and the Mets go to Clay Holmes. You're thinking, well, why's Clay Holmes in the game? Well, this was the throw day in between starts for both Clay Holmes and Sean Manaea, and so those guys made themselves available to pitch out of the bullpen. Nice little card to play. Clay Holmes looked good. Got 3 ground balls. Should have gotten out of that inning without giving up a run. But Mark Vientos makes a bad throw. Pete Crow Armstrong reaches base, and Ballesteros comes around to score. PC ends up on second base, and then a wild pitch scores him as Clay Holmes never covers the plate, or he's late to cover the plate. And when he gets there, he can't make the catch and put the tag on PCA, who's able to dive in, scoring from second base on a wild pitch, and it's 8-2 Cubs at that point. Sean Manaea comes out for the 6th, gives up a single and a 2-run homer. Now it's 10-0. Ryan Helsley was the best arm for the Mets in this game, got them through 2 innings. But now Helsley's gotten to the point that you're pitching him in mop-up duty. And you probably burn him for a day, which I guess is fine because you don't trust him in leverage anyway. But what is this team now? How do you have enough pitching to actually make a run? It really was relying on Jonah Tong building off his last start, going out, shoving against the Cubs, feeling confident that he can pitch in a playoff game. Because who's going to make those starts? And honestly, who's going to start over the weekend? You got McLean and Sproat lined up for the next 2 games. Great. That's probably your best 2 starting pitchers right now. But then what? Reports are Kodai Senga's live BP that he threw on Tuesday did not go well. He got fatigued. His velocity was down. Doesn't seem like he's going to come in on his, white horse and save the Mets. I think Clay Holmes is probably the best of the veterans. And luckily, he should be able to go on Saturday because this was just, again, his throw day in the middle of his preparation to make his next start. So maybe that's the way you go. Maybe depending on how the next 2 days shake out, if you're sitting in a good spot, maybe you give him an extra day's rest and you roll with Sean Manaea and hope that you can steal that game on Saturday if it matters and save Holmes to start game 1 of a wild card round, because then it would set you up to have Nolan McLean go on 5 days rest instead of 4 days rest. And same thing with Brandon Sproat, because right now your best plan in a wild card round, if you get there, is 2 guys who have rarely started on 4 days rest having to do it. For McLean, having to go in back-to-back starts on 4 days rest because he's pitching tonight on 4 days rest. You feel good about McLean in this game. You have your leverage arms. You can get 2 fresh arms into this bullpen to try to survive because you can option Jonah Tong today, which the Mets absolutely should. It's basically a free roster move. He's not going to pitch again in the regular season. You can still add him to the playoff roster if you think he's going to help you in that setting, which I don't even know. Maybe you take the boomer bust nature of Jonah Tong and roll him out in game 1 of a wild card round anyway. I don't know how you can trust that he can go into a game like that, because the problem with Jonah Tong in this outing was he did not have his fastball up. When Jonah Tong can't hit the top of the zone with his fastball, that elevated heater, I mean, it makes a guy that's already a 2-dimensional pitcher, just so much easier for an opposing lineup to get to, because they can basically start to eliminate the top of the zone. If he can't locate those fastballs up, when there's a changeup that starts up and is going to drop down, they can now think that's going to be that's not a fastball that's rising. That's going to be a changeup, and they can, make that adjustment and get hits that way. And then the fastball, if he's only landing at the bottom of the zone, well, now, all right, something that starts in the bottom of the zone, you feel pretty good about. Now you're just weighing the velocity difference too. Is this a fastball or is this a changeup? That's all you're looking for, because he cannot land that curveball for a strike. He does not have a pitch that he can go to when he's down 2-0 in a count. He can't flip a curveball in there for a strike. He can't throw a backdoor slider in there for a strike. And this is the concerns that I had when the Mets promoted him. The ones that I talked about Prior to the promotion, I talked to the radio voice of the Marlins, Jack McLean, a friend of mine who was in the building for Tong's debut, and we talked about this at length. Yeah, as a 2-pitch pitcher, he can survive if those 2 pitches are on. If he's locating his fastball and he's locating his changeup, he can get by, especially if he can use that curveball as a taste breaker. But if that curveball is nowhere near the zone, he can't throw it for a strike, guys are just going to spit on it every single time. It's just an auto ball. Thank you for putting me in a hitter's count. And all I'm looking for now is that fastball. And yeah, if you can locate it up, you can still beat guys. But if you're not locating it up, they're going to be able to catch up to that fastball. These are big league hitters. So Jonah Tong needs time to develop, and that's okay. But for this current team, you're just in between a rock and a hard place. And you're getting squeezed every single day. So yeah, Tong, I would say, gets optioned. I think Dickie Lovelady gets optioned. Or I don't even remember. I don't think he has options, so you might DFA him. Whatever. You can call up Brandon Waddell. You can call up Austin Warren. You got 2 fresh arms in your bullpen. Justin Hageman, you need to wait one more day. You can bring Hageman up on Friday. And at this point, it almost feels like you'd be better off going with a Waddell Hageman piggyback than a David Peterson Shaw Mania one. And obviously, I'm a little bit joking there, but they've gotten better performances from these guys shuttling back and forth from Syracuse than they've gotten from their starting pitchers lately. And so now you're in this really tough spot where it's, all right, just do whatever you can to get in. And hopefully the Mets can win the next 2 days. And if they're lucky, maybe the Reds drop the next 2 and the Diamondbacks drop the next 2. And the Mets, as an 83-win team, back their way into the playoffs. Or I guess kind of win their way in because they win the McLean and Sproat starts. And then those next 2 games don't matter. But those games do matter. If you need Saturday to make the playoffs, and the Mets probably will need Saturday to make the playoffs, who do you turn to? My guess is it is Clay Holmes. My guess is you still probably go with David Peterson on Sunday. Because I don't know how you trust either Peterson or Mania. So maybe you go with the guy that has last had a decent start, and I think that's Peterson. Maybe you just go with the upside of Sean Mania and see what happens. But this crunch you have right now on your pitching, I don't know how it actually ends up stabilizing at this point. There's only so many cards left to play. And that's what we're going to talk about in the final segment here. What's left for the Mets to do? How do they really get through this thing? And also, the other thing that we could talk about, there's a reason I'm wearing this hat today. Because the Rumble Ponies did something cool. So we're going to talk about that to close out the show on a good note, but more on the pitching crisis in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. This isn't just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can be ready and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even into the next day. The process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to Rugiet.com. That's Rugiet.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. Again, that's Rugiet, Rugiet.com. Promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know that we sent you. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and get a lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, as we look at the road ahead, again, luckily you have Nolan McLean going on Thursday night and Brandon Sproat on Friday. Like I mentioned, Brandon Waddell, Austin Warren, those are my guesses that come up for Jonah Tong and Dickie Lovelady. Justin Hageman could come up over the weekend as well. That gives you some help. The other option is Kevin Herget. So you're going to have some other bulk relief arms. And maybe you got to, turn it over to the bullpen a little bit. Maybe you got to give Huascar Braziban a start as an opener on Saturday and then go to Sean Manaea and save Clay Holmes for Sunday. I don't really know what the best course of action is here for the Mets. But their starting pitchers are going to have a very quick hook, especially if you're fortunate enough to get into October, where, heck, you might throw Jonah Tong out there for the first inning of a playoff game and give him 3 batters. And if it's not looking good, then you turn the ball over to, I don't even know at that point. Maybe it is Braziban to bail you out of an inning and to give you some length and to hopefully get the bats going and get into a game. And then maybe it's Clay Holmes for bulk relief. Maybe it's Sean Manaea. Who knows? But just to get in, you're going to have to pitch those veterans likely over the weekend. And so you will be left with most likely Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat on 4 days rest for the first 2 games of a 3-game set. And then who knows? Dealer's choice. Now, one way to help your pitching is to put good defenders out there. And so if I'm the Mets at this point, it might be time to trade defense for offense. But it goes both ways because the Mets made the decision the first game of this series to go offense, and it worked for them. They put Brandon Nimmo in center field and Starlin Marte in left. Maybe that's what you have to do. If you are going to start both Marte and Vientos against left-handed pitching, maybe that's your course of action because you need to keep Brett Beatty at third base. At the same time, though, Tyrone Taylor could have saved that start for Jonah Tong. If Jonah Tong had gone out there in the 3rd inning and gotten some early outs instead of giving up all those hits and ends up getting through 5, you would have gone back to that 1st inning play by Tyrone Taylor and say that saved the Mets. It's such a drastic difference when you have Tyrone Taylor in center field compared to Jeff McNeil, Brandon Nimmo, or even Cedric Mullins. It makes you a better team. That's why last year in the playoffs, what did they do? They went with Tyrone Taylor. Now, granted, they didn't have Jeff McNeil as an option. They didn't have Cedric Mullins as an option, I guess. They really were down to Tyrone Taylor or Harrison Bader. And they went with Tyrone Taylor, and it got them pretty far. I feel like this team, at this point, you just can't stomach Vientos at 3rd or an outfield that doesn't have a true center fielder in it. And so if that means that Starlin Marte or Mark Vientos has to ride the pine against lefty, maybe that's the best course of action. Now, you also probably look at the situation right now as a frustrated fan and think, man, how did the Mets end up here? David Stearns is a brutal executive. We're seeing a lot of Stearns flack going on right now. Now, that's not coming from me because anyone who listens to the show knows I'm a David Stearns fanboy. Call me crazy. But do I think this season's on Stearns? Not entirely. I think everybody bears some responsibility for it. But I can't now, in retrospect, go back in time with hindsight like everybody else is. And we'll have plenty of time to do a referendum on all of this. But I can't go back and say, oh, I thought the Mets should have gotten a different ace in free agency. Because I, like a lot of you, was happy with the return of Sean Manaea. I thought that between Manaea and Senga, they'd figure it out. Manaea goes down in spring training. Kodai Senga was one of the best starting pitchers in baseball until he hurt that hamstring. What was it, 1.39 ERA? Or maybe it was a 1.47 ERA before he went on the IL. It worked early. Griffin Canning was a huge part of this team. Tyler McGill was a huge part of this team. Both of those guys end up with season-ending injuries. Not sure if I mentioned it on the show yet, but McGill ended up getting Tommy John. So he's out for all 2026 as well. Could come back in 2027. The Mets still have 2 years of team control, and they're not going to cut him, I don't think. They'll do the right thing and let him rehab with them. He'll be on the 60-day IL all season next year. So that roster spot will be clogged in the offseason, but it'll open right back up for you. And so when you have someone like Jet Williams, for example, that could break camp next year, his roster spot could be, McGill could be a placeholder basically for either a Jet Williams or a Carson Bench to break camp or whoever else it is. But again, getting back to this season and what's happened, those injuries really hurt you. Frankie Montas, while he was brutal, there was reason to sign him. Now, to a 2-year deal, obviously that was a big mistake. But the Milwaukee Brewers, who are right now the best team in baseball, their front office last year traded for Montas because there was stuff in his pitch data that suggested that there was a much better pitcher in there. Just didn't work. Sean Manaea had a really good July. That no one would have thought that he'd be this bad after the trade deadline, but he has been. Kodai Senga, yes, did he look bad coming off the IL after his first outing? Sure, there were definitely some blips on the radar, but not anything that would suggest that he would end up getting optioned. So yeah, I really don't look at this situation and blame it all on David Stearns. I think it's the circumstances of this season. But now it has the Mets in a spot here where it's really tough to believe in this team to make a real run. I believe this team can make the playoffs. I believe this team can win a 3-game series in a wild card round because anybody can win a 3-game set. Do I think that this team can go into Philadelphia and beat the Phillies in a 5-game series again in the NLDS? When at that point, who starts game 1 after you pitch guys in the wild card round? I have no idea. Maybe they should grab Jack Wenninger to make his MLB debut in the wild card round. Let's talk about the Rumble Ponies. Let's forget about the Mets for now. We'll get back to them tomorrow. Let's talk about why I'm wearing this hat today. Binghamton Rumble Ponies won their championship series. They lost game 1. They battled back to even the series in game 2, and they were able to win the final game behind a great pitching performance by Jack Wenninger. He's sort of next in line when it comes to the Mets' top starting pitching prospects. Him and Jonathan Santucci, I think, are the two guys right now that I'm most intrigued with going into next season. Although there's a lot of guys who are in AA. You had RJ Gordon, Will Watson, a lot of different names. But Jack Wenninger struck out 11 in 5 innings of 2-run ball. DeAndre Smith and Chris Suero each got RBI hits in the first inning to spot Wenninger a 2-run lead. He did give up those 2 runs in the 4th inning, but in the top of the 6th inning, Jacob Reimer broke the tie with a home run. Reimer had a great playoff run, an unbelievable season. We'll have plenty of time to talk about all the Mets' top prospects throughout the offseason, but Reimer, definitely a name to watch. Could be your third baseman of the future. You got DeAndre Smith, who singled. Then you had Chris Suero, who homered, and the Rumble Ponies took a commanding 5-2 lead. Joander Suarez, TJ Shook, and Carlos Guzman pitched 4 scoreless innings of relief, with Guzman getting the final 6 outs. And the Ponies also tacked on 3 more insurance runs in the 9th. They win in a rout 8-2, and they take home the AA Eastern League title. So you have 2 affiliates that won their championship this year in the Brooklyn Cyclones and the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. And that's why I'm not upset with David Stearns. That's why I don't think that David Stearns' job is anywhere close to being on the hot seat. Because ultimately, what's going to help the Mets in the future, it's not nailing the next free agent signing. It's not going out and making the big trade for that ace. Those things can help, and we'll talk about them when we get to the offseason. We'll talk about aces on the block. We'll talk about guys that can be signed. We'll go through it all. And maybe it does make sense for the New York Mets to get a guy they can hold their hat on. But really, what's going to help the New York Mets is developing frontline starting pitching. And it might be a little bit too soon for Sproat and Tong. McLean seems like he's arrived, but those guys next year, they could be huge parts of this team. Christian Scott, who's throwing again off the mound in his Tommy John rehab, he could be a huge part of this team. And next year, maybe Manaea and Senga are better. Who knows? But this franchise, while it looks ugly right now, and this is a season that both you don't want it to end because you don't want to be done with baseball. At the same time, you almost welcome an end because you don't have to watch the Mets embarrass themselves anymore. While it doesn't feel really good to watch games like the one we watched on Wednesday night, I promise you the future is still bright for the New York Mets. It really is. Because they have a lot of arms coming. They have a couple of position players that could be real pieces for you next year with Jet Williams and Carson Bench. That could be your second baseman and your center fielder. So I really think this franchise is in a good place. They have one of, if not the best farm system in baseball right now. And that's due to the Stearns regime. You can say, oh, well, Jonah Tong, Nolan, McLean, Brandon Sproat, they were drafted by past GMs. You're not wrong, but they were developed by this front office. This infrastructure has been put in place. And you could say, oh, well, it's just, no, they hit on those guys. Those guys are great. That's it. But when you see Jack Wenninger striking out 11 in a championship game, when you see Jonathan Santucci and Will Watson and RJ Gordon, and the list goes on and on and on, when you were able to make trades at the deadline from guys that were undrafted that you just turned into relievers that were intriguing enough that they were able to net you a starting center fielder, even if it didn't work out, the fact that the Mets were able to pull off that trade for Cedric Mullins by giving up nothing, pieces that they literally used almost no resources to acquire, that's where this franchise is still in a good spot. But you can't just make it all happen overnight. And when it comes to this roster, the depth in their rotation has just evaporated. There is no trust left in a lot of these arms. And you're going to have faith in them, or you're going to have to put the ball in their hands, because you can't just pitch Edwin Diaz for 6 outs every single night. You can't rely on your bullpen to cover 5 innings every game. But that's where you're at times. And so we'll just have to see how the rest of this race unfolds. 4 games left. Mets still control their fate. Can they win tonight? Can they hold on to control going into their series against the Marlins? And then the bigger question, can they avoid embarrassment in Miami to finish off this year? It's going to be an interesting ride. I'll be with you the whole way. As always, thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. We're going to be Locked On Mets Insider. Find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll take you around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts and league-wide experts that'll take you through all the games. You find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.